So science rushes headlong without selectivity, without taste, at whatever is knowable in the blind desire to know all at any cost. And that observation is philosophy, as opposed to that is what he considers legislate greatness. By that he means like, what questions do we consider to be important? And you can spend a lot of time discussing, which I listened yesterday, the the margin of change in the voter behavior from September to October in the election. And that's like a lot of data, a lot of scientific activity about finding that out. But something that's going to change in 2 days, it also is not really a relevant knowledge, because everything hopefully is going to be determined by November 3rd. So that's the kind of what knowledge is, in terms of like, you can know indefinite things. Does that mean that they're all equal? Like every knowledge is as valuable as the other? To know something that happened in 13th century, is that as relevant as whatever? So that's what he distinguishes the legislating greatness. So that's what philosophy does. Which questions in life are important, and forms concepts for that. So that was the last thing. So starting on section 4, I just want to take some time for you to look at those sections that you already read, and uh, bring the paragraphs and the questions that you want to discuss. So anything after page 45, any questions, anything that you find interesting, anything that you find worth discussing, anything that you think is relevant for the paper, and that you can bring to your paper. And you are a little bit of investment of, how can I use this text in writing my paper? So I'm going to leave it to you. But with respect to that specific passage, you can also think of it in our common understanding, or more general understanding, of the notion of desire. What is the nature of desire? What do you desire? Or how do you desire? What do you desire? What is it that you desire, people?
Whatever you don't have.
Exactly. You desire what you don't have. That's really the kind of nature of desire. And then therefore you go after it. Yet what is the problem here uh, with respect to the nature of desire? So what happens when you attain what you desire?
You no longer desire it, maybe.
Not maybe, exactly. Yes. I mean, why do you add maybe? Absolutely. So why should I desire what I have? And that's really the paradoxical nature of it in life. Like, then you say like, oh, I want to achieve this, and that motivates me, that pushes me, etc. But there's also this kind of uh, we call it sort of anticlimactic, or we call it sort of no longer important. So once you attain what you desire, it's first of all kills your desire, and you don't desire it anymore. But it also like, well, is this really what I desired? So that's the contradiction of opposites resolving, as he says, the power of Aphrodite, that's like, that weds the opposite, the existence, with the non-existent. So the non-existence is what you don't have, and then once you have that existent, then it's not really you no longer it kills itself. That's the desire. So what is it in the ever-changing, from Heraclitus, from Anaximander, what is it that we desire in the ever-changing world? what do you always desire in this like confusion that you have or the disorientation that you have? What do we desire?
Routine. Routine.
Routine, what does routine symbolize?
Stability.
Stability.
Constant. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does stability do?
In what sense?
What is the effect of stability?
One less thing you have to think about.
What if there is nothing that you need to think about anymore?
Gives us meaning.
Security.
Yes, but what is the ultimate stability?
To be
Right.
dead.
To be dead. Yeah. I mean, if you really want to be stable, that's a really good way of being stable. So that's the paradox. We are searching for something in the midst of this whole turmoil, but what we are searching for is actually that's going to kill me. And that's really how you experience life. So like, you know, once you get in a routine, I don't know, you are too young to reflect on the structure of the routine, but still, like what happens when you get a routine? I mean, I say routine because Jack said that, but what happens with the routine?
You want to mix it up because you get bored.
Exactly. I mean, am I dead? Am I going to do this for the rest of my life? I mean, it's like, is that it? Like, there's no longer anything? So that's the kind of paradox in this opposition between constantly becoming and then searching for something that is stable. And we search for the stable and sometimes what Nietzsche describes as the metaphysical world, the not the being, it never changes, etc. But that really is death. It really is the end of all what we consider to be life as this constant change. So do we really desire, do you really desire, like you should ask to yourself, like when you are in the midst of a class and there are all these ideas swirling in your head and you get like, I'm confused. I no longer want to be confused. I'm searching for stability. That stability is your intellectual death. Like you no longer think. You are like, I figured it all out.
And what does that suggest then? Like we should be stable, we shouldn't look for stability, and what should we be looking for?
Well, I mean, that's the paradox, isn't it? Like, I cannot like tell you how to respond. I mean, search for, of course, every one of us search for clarity, etc. But that's life. I mean, how much control do I really have over that, what is going to happen? I mean, if I tell you like, do this, then if you keep doing that, then you are going to figure out that it's not the thing to do. So that's really the paradox of life in terms of turning into its opposite and understanding that rhythm, what Heraclitus calls rhythm, Nietzsche sometimes calls rhythm, is really being in tune with that, not mastering it, not like this is the, foundation according to which I'm going to act, but like swing with that. So I would just say, just go along with that. Just go along with that rhythm, which is
Are
also
you,
difficult. Yeah,
are you making reference to like the bulwark and the stream analogy from that one Heraclitus section?
exactly.
Yeah, I think I might fuck around and become a bulwark in the stream of the universe.
Really? Good. Well, I will follow your, lead on that. Okay, that's it. That's a good section. I mean, that was the reading for today, right? 74. Okay.
And you said 84 for Friday, right?
Is it correct? Yes, 74, and then Friday 84. And I apologize for the description of the protocol. I wrote last 2 sections. I meant last 3 sessions. So far everybody is doing it correctly, so I don't want to mess it up. But it's not your turn to do the protocol, right? Olivia.
No, it will be next week.
Okay. All right. Anybody else wants to go? Just by picking out a passage and not saying anything about it, contribute to the participation grade? Bless it.
My passage is on page 53. Yeah, like Nietzsche says it like later on, like I think on the next page. But then like I found the whole concept of like coming to be like paralyzing. Like it was extremely scary when I like read it. But then my quote is like, it's by Schopenhauer, where he says, like, on the indent, it says, only the first line, only by way of its acts does reality fill space and time. Like, I was having trouble trying to make sense of that.
Okay, that's a good question. It's a little bit of a technical question. Nietzsche is a post-Kantian philosopher, so he lived in 1844. So the reality, as Kant describes it, is our perception that is a world that is organized around cause and effect. So causality is for Kant and Schopenhauer, who reads Kant and who Nietzsche reads, talks about this distinction between Wirklichkeit, in German wirken, is to have an effect on something. So Wirklichkeit is also the word that means reality. Actually, he says it should be Realität, not Wirklichkeit, but we Germans think reality in terms of its causal impact. So one thing before leads to the other, then you start thinking, actually, there is a logic, there is a kind of permanent principle that explains this chaotic looking event. Something happens, then another happens, another happens. And if you think about all what we are doing at the university or in the production of knowledge, we are really trying to understand causal relationships. So, right, like there is COVID. What causes it? A virus. Like what would kill that virus? What causes the death of that virus? Or there is racism in the United States. How did it come about? What is the cause of that? To go back to history and understand causal relationships, because our understanding of reality is constantly trying to make sense of a cause-effect relationship. And we do this in social sciences, we do it in natural sciences. We admit that we cannot really find a pure causal relationship, so there's always that debate whether it's a correlation versus causation. We always study it over time in terms of its possible other effects, because we don't know what causes what unless we study it over a period of time. So from a scientific perspective, this is the reality that we describe for ourselves. So since everlasting and exclusive coming to be the impermanence of everything actual, which constantly acts and comes to be but never is, as Heraclitus teaches, is a terrible paralyzing thought, but we respond to that paralyzing thought by looking for a causal pattern that will explain how it is happening. Because, COVID emerged like, oh, this is like some chaotic thing that happened in the natural progression of things. But then we say, no, something happened somebody caused it, somebody did this, somebody did that. So we can explain that terrible thing by causal relations. And that's how we are trying to make sense of life. Like, what caused me to be so terrible? What caused me to be so screwed up in my life? Like parents, of course. So that's kind of all we are responding. So I think that's what he is referring to. That's a quote from Schopenhauer from 53 to 54. And anyway, that's my COVID rant for today. Yes, Blessed. Unmute yourself.
So is the tragic aspect of it that we will never really find the exact cause for some effect. Like that's how I was understanding it. Like I thought we can never really find, like, pinpoint the cause.
Well, the tragic aspect is that a cause-effect relationship that introduces a certain structure, what appears to be chaotic, also is not a permanent causality. So it's not a permanent relationship. So sometimes something causes something and then it stops causing that something, because this is the nature of nature. In a Newtonian universe, we always try to establish universal laws of, attraction, gravity, etc. But then when you get to the quantum mechanics, quantum physics, then it becomes much more complicated to ascertain this worldview. So again, the issue here is that, yes, there might be even causal relationships at times, but we cannot expect that to be forever. So I'm waiting for a time when smoking doesn't cause cancer, in which I can I can smoke, but I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime or any time. So that's why I quit.
That would be great. I feel like my life would improve sharply if I just started smoking, but I can't.
You cannot because you don't want to die?
No, there are more immediate medical things.
Exactly. I do too. I mean, I think my life would improve a lot. So, but I would certainly be, okay, I should not record. The what? Okay, I don't know what to record, what not to record. So this is going to look a little silly. So go ahead. Yes, Travis.
The the part that I saw that I was interested in was on page 46. I don't think it was Nietzsche that said this. I think it's a quote, but he said the proper measure with which to judge any and all human beings is that they're really creatures who should not exist at all, and who are doing penance for their lives by their manifold sufferings and their death. What could we expect of such creatures? Are we not all sinners under sentence of death? We do penance for having been born, first by living and then by dying. Yeah. So I will have a question. I know that we discussed like a little of this before, but I just wanted to put that out there.
No, that's a great quote. Let me introduce the section on 48 that rather, this is on one page, I mean, 2 pages after, on 48. And he writes, rather when he saw in the multiplicity of things that have come to be a sum of injustices that must be expiated, he grasped with both fingers the tangle of the profoundest problem in ethics. This is when we discussed about the Anaximander fragment. Remember how the passage of time is related to paying penalty and penance. When the restless, ceaseless coming into being and giving birth, whence that grimace of painful disfiguration of the countenance of nature, whence the never-ending dirge in all the realms of existence. I mean, he writes well, and it's translated well too. But a little further down, what is your existence worth? And I think that's and then he says, and if it is worthless, why are you here? Remember when we were discussing the issue of right to exist with respect to Sophocles, and we had that discussion, you can go check it out. This is really kind of Nietzsche's way of asking the question, in terms of when you ask the right to exist, you are not asking this general question of like whether people should live or be killed. Though of course not. Kate is not here, but she was introducing that into the question of fascism, etc. But here the issue is like, what asking that question, what is your existence worth, is really not it is worthless or it's worth, but it's like, why? What is it that makes you, given that you are gonna die, that this is all passing? So yeah, I found that passage very compelling in terms of what we discussed, Travis. Yeah. But I find also very, oh, go, Callie. Sorry.
Sorry. So the passage where it's like, what is your existence worth? And if it is worthless, why are you here? That was actually the passage that I wanted to talk about. Like, I don't understand like why we're asking that question, I guess, because like who is deciding like what your existence is worth? Like, is it like your own personal self? Like, or is this like a self-reflection thing, or like who is like making that decision? I guess.
Yeah, that's a legitimate and great question. But I guess like don't think from the perspective of the answer. Think from the perspective of the question itself. What would it mean to raise that question? So whenever you are faced with the question, we don't immediately have to think how it is going to be answered, because it's not going to be answered in the same way all the time. And it's not going to be determined once and for all. So it is a way of attuning to your existence with the question. So sure, I mean, who is going to say, of course, like ideally I would, but do I say why I'm here, or that I deserve to be here, that I can be here, and that is that even my determination? Those are the types of questions. So we stay with the question. So I don't have an answer to your question. We stay with the question, and there is that's the value of remaining with the question, rather than questioning the possibility of answer, which you are right. It's like, who decides that? I don't know. Is that, of course, it's not satisfactory, but yeah.
No, I just think that I'm like frustrated by philosophy, because like I want an answer, and like I don't want to like think about the question, and like don't think about like what the answer could be, and just like ask what it means to ask the question. I don't like that. So I'm just frustrated, I think, with the material.
So I guess then I have an impossible task of making you love your own frustration, or somehow appreciate that frustration and don't run away from that frustration, or don't even see it as a frustration. In fact, see it as a sort of great attitude towards life. Because I would rather be with frustrated people than with people who think that they have all the answers. But I don't know. I think that's a good point. But you can also take one step, is like, why am I frustrated? Why am I frustrated with this? Who taught me that I should not be frustrated? And who taught me that there were answers? So, Isaac, yes.
Well, to delve into that question a little more, I find it really interesting. Like, I think the whole notion of injustice and justice with regard to the coming about of the entire universe is a little bit strange. And I think it really is like on page, let's see, 46, Nietzsche says, he will extract that melancholy doctrine from its application to human life and project it onto the general quality of all existence. So I think he's right. It is really an anthropomorphic metaphor, and that his like pessimistic worldview of human life is kind of reflected in the view that existence is injustice and we have to pay penance for it. And I think that kind of speaks to what Nietzsche is talking about in terms of like philosophy as a way of life, or like philosophy as expression and art, in that like by using all these anthropomorphic metaphors to ask questions and ask questions, they're really trying to benefit themselves somehow.
Yeah, I'm not really sure it's anthropomorphic. It's definitely from the perspective of human being, because I mean that's really that's really the paradox, isn't it? Like, how can we not be anthropomorphic if we are anthropos? And what is this desire not to be anthropomorphic? Like, who is not anthropomorphic? Like, what kind of understanding would be not anthropomorphic, other than exactly the opposite of what we seem to be doing? So if I know that I'm being anthropomorphic, I'm going to be the opposite. So that's a very actually interesting and philosophically challenging question, because there's a lot of animality studies nowadays, like animal as opposed to human, or human animal as opposed to non-human animal, etc. And we seem to be more and more conscious about our anthropocentric understanding of nature. But what would it mean not to be? What would it mean not to approach the question of climate change, for example, from a non-anthropomorphic perspective?
I mean, I think specifically in the case of climate change, if you didn't approach it from an anthropomorphic perspective, you'd have two options. Like, you could approach it from a perspective where you prioritize like the viewpoint and life of a different species that would also be affected by it, or you could approach it from the view that individual species don't matter that much, in which case it's really not a problem, because, you know, people love to say like the earth is dying, but it's like, no, it's not. Like, the earth is going to be here. We're dying. That's the thing that people are concerned about.
Exactly. And that to me is like, that's very good. So, you know, isn't then being concerned about climate change, quote unquote, climate change, the ultimate anthropomorphism, anthropocentrism?
Yeah, but I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I like anthropocentric thing.
Yes, but the problem is we are destroying the planet because we are being anthropocentric too. That's the paradox, right? That I mean, you know, like, I'm not really making this up. Climate change, global warming is a really tragic issue. We see it as a mere problem, like an engineering problem, some kind of a scientific problem. No, philosophically, scientifically, it is a tragic issue, because we don't really want to save the planet, we want to save ourselves. But the reason that we are in the position of having to save the planet is because we keep saving ourselves. So that's really the tragic aspect that I want to bring always the scientific discourse into this issue, is like, it is not a scientific solution, because scientific solution at best is going to postpone the problem. Scientific solution is not going to change the way in which we relate to the world, because science relates to the world in a certain way. So it is a tragic issue. And I think it's worth to think about and be frustrated about, Callie, because that's really the extent of the problem. Yes.
I feel like, though, an important distinction for me is that while climate change doesn't have a scientific solution, or rather, the scientific solutions already exist and are not being implemented, which means that the solution that needs to happen is social and cultural. Like, I think it's important to distinguish that I think that there still can be an anthropocentric solution to climate change, because it's not like every human got together and decided to cause climate change. Like, there's a small subset of people that have kind of engineered us to this position. So
Sure.
I don't see it as tragic in as much as, like, it's deep within human nature to do climate change, and like we can't help but do climate change if we're trying to help ourselves. Like, I don't think that's true. I think that it's a function of very specific cultural institutions that have existed for about 200 years.
Let's say 400 years. In terms of historical development. But we are also all somehow, while I'm not really causing myself climate change, I am part of a machinery that is responsible, and I benefit from that in a very substantial way. So that's maybe the paradox, but we are not talking about that. And so go ahead, Isaac.
Yeah, I was just gonna make the point that even if climate change isn't necessarily like part of an inevitable part of human nature, I think there is a certain like tragic aspect of it, to where even if it wasn't climate change, our continual efforts to try and save ourselves or better ourselves is ultimately going to lead us to more issues. Like if you think about the atomic bomb or all the other problems that our scientific development has brought us.
Sure, and again, like by saying that it is climate, I'm not tragic. I'm not saying like, oh, there's nothing we need to do, there's nothing we should do, or something like that. But for us to be able to think the extent of the problem, because yes, maybe we can shut down all the factories and the oil and whatever, but like, so that people are switching to electric cars, but you probably need more oil to produce electricity. So it's always this kind of paradoxical relationship to how we are actually, there is this kind of Democratic Party discourse of, oh, we are going to switch to the clean energy, and that's going to create even more jobs, and everything is going to be wonderful. We just need clean energy. It's like, you know, that's sort of participating within that same capitalist mode of production. So anyway, whatever. I mean, I don't have to demonstrate that it is tragic, whatever that means. It's just that there are questions within any enterprise that actually, that there are solutions that really produce the questions. So as you said, whatever we do is going to lead to further complications, which will frustrate Callie, but you'll go with that. So. Okay. Somebody else had their hand. Oh yeah, Jared.
And I'm just curious, because I keep wondering why humans want to like save their own species and not like other species, like in general, like and according with climate change, how you say like it's caused because humans want to extend humanity. Is it because humans see animals as like not having human qualities or emotions or intellect, or is it because they only see humans as the center of the world and animals are something that are just there as well?
Well, I mean, historically and culturally, in almost every religion, in every way of belief that human beings is at the top of the species, like all the species. And we are also not even in the, they used to call it like food chain. I don't know whether they still use that expression. We are not even in it anymore. Like we just eat. Nobody eats us. So in general, like a like a principle. So yeah, I think that we do think that inevitably, inescapably think that we are superior, even in our attempt not to be superior. Because when we think like, oh, we should not treat other animals beneath us, we are still acting from a perspective of superiority. That's sort of the patronizing nature of all helping other species rather than ourselves. Like, but we never imagine ourselves like lions are going to save us. We never imagine like, you know, snakes are going to contribute to the survival of human species. Unless we do something with the snakes. They themselves are not going to do it. So, but we can do it for other animals. They cannot do it for us.
Okay, so we're going to have clean energy by building a snake wheel. And it's a wheel that the snakes go around in.
We can do it. It's imaginable. But I'm suspicious whether snakes themselves are going to be like, these human beings need clean energy. Let's make ourselves into wheels so that they can drive around or something.
I mean, do we have any choice but to be human-centric in these issues? I mean, we're humans.
Well, yeah, that's why criticizing ourselves for being anthropomorphic, anthropocentric, as I heard Isaac was doing, which is cool, but it's also problematic precisely because of what you said. Like, even not desiring to be anthropocentric is an anthropocentric concept. So yes, therefore existence is melancholic. I'm sorry. That proves that point, Isaac. Okay, go ahead. You object to that. Why? It is, or are you saying like it is what it is?
Well, I just think we can, even if anthropocentrism isn't escapable, it doesn't mean we have to like apply it to everything. It doesn't mean we have to, like, it's a big issue in biology with different animals. Like if you view them like they have human emotions, you're gonna not understand them as well as you could. And I think in this case, Anaximander, because of his view of humankind, creates this generalization about the nature of the universe, which I would just say is not necessarily the best way to figure stuff like that out. Okay. But I think really what he's doing is trying to ask the question to, you know, like where we were talking about living the life of a philosopher.
So what page were you on? It was 46 or?
Yeah, 46. Yeah, the whole part where he's talking about how human life is shitty and therefore the universe is injustice.
Okay, so let me push back on that a little bit because that melancholy doctrine from its application to human life and projected onto the general quality of all existence, it might not be logical, he continues, but it certainly is human. To view now together with Anaximander, all coming to be as though it were an illegitimate emancipation for an eternal being. No, melancholy is that what happens is that is actually not so much Anaximander, but it is something that is shared for Nietzsche by Christianity. Why is Christianity's view of life melancholic? How does Christianity see life? Some of you are Christians, I think. Well, officially.
Well, that you mean like how everybody's a sinner and needs to atone?
Well, yes, but in terms of existence, it's a fall. It's a fall. Like we fell from something which was perfect. So when we experience everything that changes and the sort of chaotic nature of coming to be, we immediately project something like, unchanging. So this is again the dialectical nature of human thinking. When we experience all change, like Heraclitus or Anaximander, then that conceptually requires a background against which we can think of this change. And the background is permanence. Therefore, we fall from that. Our understanding of ourselves is less than perfect, but that is a projection of a perfection that comes from our own thinking. So then he continues when Anaximander says, unlike Christianity, which is, I think, really cool, the immortality and everlasting, this is on page 47, the middle of the page, the word, the immortality and everlastingness of primal being does not lie in its infinitude or its inexhaustibility, as the commentators of Anaximander generally assume, because they are kind of Christian, but in the fact that it is devoid of definite qualities that would lead to its passing. Hence, its name, the indefinite, thus named the primal being, is superior to that which comes into being, ensuring thereby eternity and the unimpeded course of coming to be. Thus, ultimate unity of the indefinite, the womb of all things, it is true, be designated by human speech only as negative, as something which the existence world of coming to be can give no predicate. And that is later on, even in Christianity, understood as negative theology. You really cannot make positive predicates and attributes to an unchanging apeiron, in the case of Anaximander, but unchanging God. Because everything that we say about God by definition is wrong. And we can never say anything positive and a predication about God. And within Christianity, especially in the Middle Ages, there is this incredibly cool tradition of negative theology and the mysticism that our relationship to God can never be a kind of relationship to a being that judges us. And I think Nietzsche precisely has that in mind. So if you are interested in this, like there are people like Meister Eckhart and a lot of Rhineland female thinkers and mystics, they are really interesting in the way in which they think about the everlasting and unchanging nature of God. And they don't even call it God. They sometimes call it like godliness or Godhead, which is not a positive entity, which is the direct opposite, dialectical opposite of what we consider to be passing away of this world, but we sort of reify a being, which we should not do. So, yeah, I can give you all the references to those Rhineland mystics and Meister Eckhart and how we think. So I was really blown away when it's like only as negative. We cannot even talk about that unchanging structure as positive. That's really cool. I forgot this about Nietzsche, that he talks about this in this section. Anybody else who wants to talk about how philosophers should live? Yes, Travis.
It doesn't really add to the conversation, but earlier you had said something about animals and if animals like work for humans, so something like that. So I just right.
What did I say? Say it again. It was cut off.
About like animals and how they don't really like try to do stuff for humans on purpose.
Who?
You said that earlier.
Animals don't do it for humans.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share like an old Jamaican story. So like earlier in like life, there were some snakes in the country, and so I think the white people, because there was slavery here, so the white people brought some animals from Africa I think you guys call them ferrets, but we call them something else here. But anyways, they came here and the snakes were causing like illnesses and killing people. So they carried the animals from Africa to here and they ended up killing the snakes. So I mean, they weren't technically like, we're gonna kill the snakes for humans, but they did help the humans get rid of the disease and whatever that the snakes caused. So yeah.
No, I mean, again, like, okay, the movement away from our natural relationship with other species on Earth and our relationship to the world, that movement, that move away was really made possible by this kind of scientific, industrial, rational thinking of the last 400 years. So to me, to just sort of see that for what it is, for better or for worse, the position that we are in, not so much what we can think. I mean, Isaac might think that, you might think that, that's perfectly cool. We all have different opinions, etc. But how do we organize our lives? How do we sort of set up factories in which we produce and kill species? Now, you can think whatever you want about the human relationship to other animals. And you might be a good-hearted person and you might think that we should have a different relationship to animals. That's perfectly fine. And I don't contest that. But what I'm looking at is we create chicken factories. We create meat factories. They are really factories. And we produce animals, we breed them, we manufacture them, we kill them, we cut them, we sell them. Now, regardless of all your opinions about our relationship to the animals, this is how we organize our lives. That's really the issue. As long as we organize our lives like that, it is to a certain extent not irrelevant, but not as effective what we think about this relationship. We ride horses, we breed animals, we have pets, we put clothes on them, we walk them around. Like, we do these things. And this is not a sort of, it's not a good relationship to other creatures. So I'm not criticizing anybody for thinking what they think and believing what they believe, but there's also a kind of reality of how we organize our lives. So yes, you might not go to the grocery store and buy that pack of meat, but that pack of meat is there. It's produced, it's made. And that speaks to our relationship to other animals in a way that my beliefs don't.
Yeah, in the US, like the way the law sees animals, they don't classify lab mice as actually animals. They don't have like any animal rights or anything at all.
Yes, and animal rights is something that we give to other animals. But you know, if somebody were to say like we demand our human rights, we get them, we fight for them. Animals don't do that, and that's because we set up the structure of it in terms of rights. And animals don't have a chance because it is a legal concept and they don't have sort of legal representation. And so this is the reality. Thinking that, analyzing that, doesn't mean I think we are superior to human beings. I say we live as we are superior to human beings. And unless we change that living, we are talking about, I don't know what, fantasy world, which is great, but not real. And then people say like, oh, I love my pet. It's your pet. Like, you purchased or kind of rescued them. Like, you know, dogs don't go to human shelters and pick up human beings and adopt them and get them shots and stuff like that. So that's how we live. That's we live it. So we need to be like, acknowledge that. And even if we give rights to animals, we are the ones who are going to protect those rights. They are not. Anyway, I mean, I'm not arguing we should be superior. I'm just saying we do everything else as if we are superior. I would be happy if like dogs would set up a farm and breed human beings or something. And also like when we say animal, that's also a very sort of already a insulting concept. Because how many species, how many different kinds of animals are we talking about when we say animal? So like, would a horse be like, oh, okay, I'm just like a cockroach? Or a whale would be just like, yeah, I'm a little, you know, cat, just like that. So when we use the concept of animal, that's already an incredible human power to group all of these living beings into one category. Yes, there is Animal Farm. I think that was about human beings, right? Yeah. Okay, so, I mean, I don't know. This is a little bit sidetracked, like tangent, but it's cool. It's okay. But I like this section I want to read before we go any further. So if it is worthless, why are you here? This is the question that frustrated Callie. So your guilt, I see, causes you to tarry in your existence. With your death, you have to expiate it. So there is a kind of like, especially for Nietzsche, especially in Christianity, there is that notion of like, I am here because I sinned. I fell. I mean, my life is falling, like because I'm not where I'm supposed to be. That's Christian anthropology, like how it sees human beings. With your death, look how your earth is withering, how your seas are diminishing and drying up. Apparently, there is some kind of change in Nietzsche's time too. And the seashell on the mountain can show you how much has dried up already. Even now, fire is destroying your world. It's like 2020, like fire. You know. Someday it will go up in fumes and smoke. But ever and anew, another such world of ephemerality will construct itself. So hopefully we won't be around. Who is there that could redeem you from the curse of coming to be? A man who poses questions such as these, whose thinking in its upward flight kept breaking all empirical ropes. I love that sentence. Catching instead at superlunary ones, such a man very likely does not welcome an ordinary mode of living. I mean, that to me is like how philosophical reflection, as frustrating and terrible it might be, is really going to change your life. According to Nietzsche, now, which I agree. Okay, I wanted to add that because it's in that section. So, anybody else? Those who don't talk too much but want to talk now. You have a section?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was page 62, and about like when he's talking about fire and the Aeon thing, and I guess I wasn't quite sure if he was saying that God is like an artist in that he is within what he made. Sorry?
Can you read it for us?
Oh, yeah, it was quite a long.
Good, we have time. Such is the game that the Aeon plays with itself.
I always get confused when I find the page.
You got confused when you found the page? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I can't do it under pressure. Wait 1 second.
No pressure. Just like pick out a sentence. It's fine.
Okay, I guess, yeah, one of the things I was interested in is how he talks about play. So on 62, he says, in this world, only play, players, artists, and children engage in it, exhibits coming to be and passing away, structuring and destroying without any moral additive in forever equal innocence.
And as children, an artist play. Go on.
Oh, now I've lost it again.
Equal innocence on line 9.
Oh yeah, and as children and artists play, so plays the ever-living fire. It constructs and destroys all in innocence, such as the game that the Aeon plays with itself. Transforming itself into water and earth, it builds towers of sand like a child at the seashore, piles them up and tramples them down. From time to time, it starts the game anew. An instant of
Sadie.
yeah, that. And again, it is seized by its need, as the artist is seized by his need to create. Not hubris, but the ever, sorry?
Yes.
Yeah. But the ever self-renewing impulse to play calls new worlds into being. The child throws its toys away from time to time and starts again in innocent caprice. But when it does build, it combines and joins and forms its structures regularly, conforming to inner laws. So,
You
yeah.
need to go on a little bit more.
More?
Please.
Okay, only aesthetic man can look thus at the world, a man who has experienced in artists and in the birth of art objects how the struggle of the many can yet carry rules and laws inherent in itself, how the artist stands contemplatively above and at the same time actively within his work, how necessity and random play, oppositional tension and harmony must pair to create a work of art.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So is it that like the creator or God is playing in some way? And or is it that this is what the fire is doing and the Aeon is kind of playful?
Well, I think that he's thinking of them together, but what is in the, why is he, I mean, I'm pretty sure, pretty confident that this is a metaphor of how he understands existence. So what does it mean to think the being as a child's play?
It makes it all seem a bit purposeless.
Yes, exactly. Because purpose is what? Purpose is for human beings. That's what we introduce. Like, you know, think of all the games that you played when you were young. What was it? This is a really, very important issue, actually. The games that you played when you were young. What did you play?
Yeah, you go, Jack.
Oh, like when we were young, we were like Toys R Us, playing with toys, maybe like your Game Boy, PSP, that kind of stuff. Nothing of real significance now that I think about it.
Well, the difference actually, maybe it is in terms of significance or not, but also like a game and a play. Game has a purpose. You have a Game Boy, Game Girl, I don't know what it is. Like you try to beat your opponent. And even when I was buying toys for my children, they were like, oh, this helps them to count. This helps them to develop their cognitive skills. So already into the nature of the game, we insert this purpose. But when a child plays, as an adult, you look at it, it's like, what are you doing? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you make a castle and then put it down, and then, like, your play has no purpose. And that's a really important distinction of how we understand life, because we today think that life serves a purpose. It has a purpose, it has a point, and you organize your lives accordingly. You say like, I am living now everything that I do. I mean, people say that, like some sort of really high-powered educators, like, everything you do has a purpose. Don't do anything in vain. Everything has to serve a purpose. I was like, what am I? Like, what am I really? Like something that needs to be plugged in order to exist in a certain way? And when you play, you don't. You just be. You just are. You don't have any extra explanation, justification. That's existence. That's actually sort of not putting a meta anthropomorphic or a kind of melancholic perspective on existence. It just is, period. Just like you just play. It doesn't have a purpose. That's it. And it is incredibly liberating to think that there is really no purpose to my existence, because otherwise I'm putting on myself this incredible pressure that everything that I do has to serve something. Like, what kind of life is that? I just am. I don't need a justification. I don't need a purpose. I don't need a brand. I don't need to make myself acceptable to other people. I just am.
So could that be a kind of escape or a solution to life being tragic?
Say it again. I'm not sure I understand the question correctly. Yeah.
I was just thinking maybe if viewing life like that as playful and not necessarily has to have a purpose, if that can then escape how tragic life is, because maybe it's tragic because like in Antigone, it's tragic because they're fulfilling a certain destiny that there's a certain way it's supposed to go, and if it's playful, then it's not like that.
You absolutely, yes. Write that in your paper. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is kind of tragic in the sense that, I mean, I don't know. Okay, so stop.
Like when you started talking, I was kind of apprehensive, like, because I think there is a certain value to like the pressure that we put on ourselves. I mean, if we just sit around doing whatever we want all day, we get bored and it sucks. I learned that over quarantine. But so I think you can put pressure on yourself in a lot of different ways without necessarily equating that to the purpose of your existence, and understanding that it is ultimately for your own enjoyment.
Sure. And if you are enjoying it, then don't complain. So I think that's I mean, but then the question is, why do I enjoy life? Why constantly putting pressure on myself? And that's a worthwhile question. And I feel exactly the same way. It's like, and therefore our perception with other people never match. So like, yeah, that's a very important issue.
So like we have all these perceptions, right? Like we just can sense pretty much anything, and there's not really anyone who can't sense anything unless they're like in a coma, but they're still thinking, we assume, in a coma. And sometimes they can still sense, sometimes they can still hear. But all of the like pretty much every living thing can observe in some way. And we may not know if other living things can think like necessarily what we think is thinking, but I can't tell if we're given the ability to think because we can observe, or if we can observe because we have the ability to think.
Great question. Josue, answer.
Well, You want me to answer because of 19th century?
Whatever. Answer the question.
Yeah, can you say it again?
No, he cannot say it again. You should have listened. So Jared's question was, can we think because we have perception, or we have perception because we can think? Is that fair, Jared?
I think we need both.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's not an easy answer. Just kidding. Can we have perception without thinking?
Yeah. I mean,
You are going to manage to fail 19th century in ancient Greek philosophy.
oh my God, you're putting me on the spot right now.
Yes,
just
I'm putting
thinking
you
of-
on the spot. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we can do both.
Well,
Yeah.
Kant's claim is that, for Jared, like that as a sort of response, you cannot have perception without employing concepts. Human perception is never devoid of concepts. Perception is never devoid of thinking. And that starts with Descartes in modernity, and it's all the way to Kant, and even to contemporary philosophers. So again, what you are asking is a philosophical question, and as frustrating as it is, there are multiple ways of approaching that question. There is no one answer that we will feel comfortable with, but I think human perception without thinking seems to be an abstraction. We can think that to be possible, but when we actually see things, we see trees, we see bottles, we see books, we don't see green patches of perceptual content, we see it as a whole. So that's thinking. Kiet, Rance, Caitlin, David, Cameron. Anybody? Since I put Josue on the spot, I can put you on the spot. Cameron, yes, go ahead.
One passage that I thought was just interesting, but I don't really have any particular question about it, is on the bottom of page 54 and on to the top of 55.
Uh-huh.
And it says, honey, says Heraclitus, is at the same time bitter and sweet. The world itself is a mixed drink which must constantly be stirred. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to think about the world.
How is honey bitter?
Put a little chili in there, or like I don't know.
I mean, the only way that I can think of is like after honey, everything else is bitter. So if you have that sweet taste in your mouth, everything else is going to sound bitter. But I can't think of. Yeah, Isaac.
The way I interpret it is that if you're measuring like the sweetness of honey, there's also some measurable bitterness there.
Sure, I'm sure there is. But like, that's like after you eat something sweet, everything else now sounds bitter. I mean, tastes bitter. I mean, not everything else, but like, if you have like, if you eat a chocolate before drinking a cup of tea, that cup of tea will be unusually bitter. Therefore, you mixed it with honey. That's it. Mixed. Life is a mixed drink. Okay, that should be a slogan somewhere.
What is considered the world here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Like all our experiences, our common existence.
Is it like an individual's level or a general level? Because it talks about eating honey on an individual's level.
Yes, sure. I think that they are the same. I think that's what the point that he's making, and that was to a certain extent Isaac's complaint about like seeing life as in terms of human life. And we always sort of have that mixed. When we say life, we mostly talk about human life. And the world is human world. Like when we say world, you know, maybe the world is different for other creatures or other beings, but we are really talking about our own world. And so, and we project from our experiences, like melancholy. When we feel melancholic, we feel like the whole world is melancholic. That's what Nietzsche was saying about Heraclitus. Okay, Rance, you have your hand up, so.
I just want to just say a quick thing. I mean, so throughout the text, we hear the idea of fire, and so I was thinking, what were they building upon God, saying that that were they getting this idea from God, the idea of fire? Because he said the next time, I mean, in the Bible it says, mentions quite a few times about the world being put on fire the next time God comes down here. So is he building upon that idea, or how is that working? Or what does he mean by fire and cold? Then how about that?
Well, if anything, the Bible is building on this idea because this was way before the Bible. So there is a certain historical study that you can engage with the Bible as a text and how much of it actually sort of adapts from already existing human archetypal thoughts. And Nietzsche says that, like they established the archetypes. This is both conceptually true in Christianity, but also textually in terms of finding evidence of how certain stories within the Bible was actually already existing human stories, that it was not sort of like emerging out of the blue or something. So, but the point of the fire is that it is consuming, that life is being consumed. Okay, this was a weird class. So Friday we will be a little less weird. So I will continue with the same model, but this time I'm going to call on you. I'm going to say you, and then you don't have to prepare a question if you are too nervous about talking. You just need to read a section that you find, like Cameron, interesting, beautiful, heartwarming, frustrating, whatever it is. So I want to make sure that people who are just sitting there are not just sitting there, but also contributing to our discussion. So I'm going to call on people on Friday. So please just underline a passage, and just for formality, for the sake of talking, make sure that you have a passage, okay? That's Friday. In the meantime, if you have any questions about your papers, think about them until Friday, because your papers are due on Monday, right? Monday. Is that November 2nd? Yeah, because after the election, there's no need to write a paper anymore. The world is going to fall apart. So I need to have the papers before the election. So November 3rd is the election. That's right.